We are now going to perform a low anterior resection using the CDH circular stapler. You would also get the opportunity to see a contour stapler, which is a modified version of a linear cutter. You will be presented with a simulated pelvis with attached rectum. As you can see in this rectal specimen, the marker represents the position of the tumor. The principle behind this resection is to resect the tumor with appropriate margin below and above the tumor. To start off with, you would need to put a stay suture below the tumor. All layer suture on either side of the bowel, and this will then be secured with a hemostat. Following insertion of the stay sutures, we will now divide the rectum below the tumor. The contour stapler allows us to divide the rectum in a confined space. I will now insert the contour stapler below the marker. We will now close the stapler below the tumor. Following closure of the stapler, you should wait 15 seconds for adequate tissue compression. After 15 seconds, you can now deploy the stapler. And the beauty of this contour stapler is that it staples and cuts the bowel within a confined space. Once the stapler is released, the two bowel ends are separated, as you can see in this exercise. Once this is done, we will now address the proximal part of the bowel. This is to allow us to perform an end-to-end colorectal anastomosis. Usually, with a classic anterior resection, the proximal part of the bowel would have been divided after division of the inferior mesenteric vessels. So, division of the distal part allows the specimen to be removed and sent for histopathological examination. But in this exercise, we will divide the rectum above the tumor so that we can continue with our exercise. To insert the purse string, one can either use a purse string applicator like the one I have with me here, or one can perform a hand-sewn purse string. For the purpose of this exercise, I will perform a hand-sewn purse string, but I will quickly demonstrate to you how the purse string applicator works. To apply it, one would insert the bowel between the jaws of the purse string applicator and then compress fully. Following this compression, a straight needle would be inserted at the two holes on either side of the purse string applicator, and this automatically inserts the purse string. Both needles will then be withdrawn from the other end of the purse string applicator. The needles are secured between a hemostat and then cut. purse string applicator is now removed, and as you can see, a purse string has been inserted quite nicely. We're now going to perform a hand-sewn purse string. It is essential that a monofilament suture is used for this exercise, and this could either be Prolene, Monocryl, or PDS. But my favorite suture for this exercise is a 2O Prolene on a 26mm round-bodied needle, which I now have. Performing this exercise, one should ensure that the whole thickness of the bowel is taken, all layers of the bowel are taken, and the sutures are not too far apart, because taking the sutures too far apart may cause the suture to drag. It is essential to prepare the bowel appropriately before inserting the purse string, and usually one starts from outside the bowel inside with no more than 5mm from the edge of the bowel. The end of the bowel should now be secured with a hemostat. A good assistant is important here to prevent locking of the sutures. Let go. Thank you. That's it. Yeah. As one approaches the starting suture, it's important to reverse the suture so that one ends up at the same position as the first suture. So this is what I'm doing now. We now have a purse string that has been inserted using a monofilament suture. Once the purse string has been inserted, one will now open the circular stapler. This is a CDH25. One should completely open the stapler so that the head of the stapler can be removed. I'm now going to insert the lubricated head of the stapler onto the proximal bowel beyond the purse string. This should now be tied snugly to the anvil. Two ends of the purse string can either be cut, although some surgeons prefer a length of the purse string to remain, because this may serve as an indicator when the knife of the stapler cuts through the bowel. Okay. Before selecting the stapler, it is important to ensure that one knows the correct size of stapler to use. The best way to do this is to check using a sizer. I have here two different sizes, 25 and a 29. And this should be inserted incrementally. So you start with the smaller size, working up to the largest. And that will help in selecting the right type of stapler. The next step is now to introduce the circular stapler. Whoever is inserting the circular stapler should remember that he or she is no longer sterile. It is therefore important for that person not to contaminate the operative field. Before inserting the stapler, insert a lubricated finger, and if necessary, you may need to insert another finger for gentle anal dilatation prior to insertion of the circular stapler. Gently insert the circular stapler in the direction of the pelvic curvature. This should be done with the support of the abdominal surgeon, who would help direct and manipulate the anvil of the stapler into the correct position. Once the head is up to the staple line, then the knob is then twisted anti-clockwise so that the spike can protrude through the end of the rectum. It is important that the abdominal surgeon pays attention and help to support this process. It's better for the spike to go either side of the staple line. And the abdominal surgeon will now make a nick to allow tension-free protrusion. Completely advance the spike until the brown part of the spike is visible. The abdominal surgeon will now help to insert the head of the gun into the spike. And it is important to hear an audible click. Once the click is heard, then the perineal surgeon starts to withdraw the spike. This should be with the support of the abdominal surgeon to ensure that there are no tissues or other structures between the top and the bottom parts of the anastomosis. This is particularly important when doing a low anterior resection in women to ensure that the vagina is not incorporated into the staple line. You continue to withdraw the spike by turning the knob clockwise, at the same time watching the indicator. The red line has to be within the green indicator before the stapler is fired. It is important to wait 15 seconds before firing the stapler. It is also important to check the proximal part of the bowel to ensure that this is not twisted. You should release the safety catch and then hold the handle. It is important that when firing the stapler, this should be done in one clean sweep. Do avoid jerky movements because this can cause multiple cuts through the anastomosis. And you would hear a characteristic crunch following deployment of the stapler. Once the stapler has been fired, you must re-engage the safety catch again, and then you remove the stapler by turning the knob anti-clockwise with a 3/4 turn. The abdominal surgeon helps to secure the anastomosis while the perineal surgeon gently teases off to remove the stapler. Okay. Once the stapler has been removed, the head of the stapler will now be disconnected to check that there are two complete donuts. You do this by removing the head of the stapler and then removing the washer to demonstrate the first complete donut and the second complete donut. If the donuts are not complete, then it is important to thoroughly examine the colorectal anastomosis. Most surgeons will routinely do an air insufflation test to ensure the air tightness of the anastomosis. This is performed by putting some warm saline into the pelvis, occluding the lumen of the bowel with a soft clamp proximal to the anastomosis, and using a 50 millimeter bladder syringe to gently insufflate air through the anal canal. If the anastomosis is watertight, then there should be no bubbles. If the donuts are incomplete and the anastomosis is watertight, some surgeons are of the opinion that no further action needs to be taken. However, even if the donuts are complete, but there is an air leak with air insufflation test, then it is important to thoroughly examine the anastomosis, identify any leakage, close such a leakage with appropriate suture like a PDS. You should now repeat the air insufflation test to confirm that there is no further air leakage.